The weight of the truth. The ride back to Christopher's estate after the charity event was entirely suffocating. The silence in the back of the limousine was no longer the comfortable, quiet companionship they had slowly built over the past few months. It was heavy, fractured, and brimming with unspoken questions. Hillary stared out the tinted window at the blurring city lights, Sarah's venomous words echoing relentlessly in her mind. Was she just a pawn? The very thought made her chest ache with a profound, terrifying vulnerability. Christopher sat rigidly beside her, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle feathered in his cheek. He could feel the immense distance growing between them, a chasm created entirely by his own foolish past machinations. He knew he had to speak, to explain, but the man who had built an empire on calculated words suddenly found himself completely paralyzed by the fear of losing the one real thing he had accidentally found. The confrontation. As soon as the heavy mahogany doors of the mansion clicked shut behind them, Hillary couldn't hold it in any longer. She turned to face him in the grand foyer, her eyes shining with unshed tears, but her posture remarkably straight and resilient. "Is it true, Christopher?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, but laced with the quiet strength that had always disarmed him. "Was this all just a meticulously calculated game to you? A way to parade me in front of Sarah and stroke your own bruised ego?" Christopher froze, the cold billionaire facade totally crumbling away to reveal the exhausted, terrified man underneath. He took a hesitant step toward her, but stopped when she instinctively took a step back. Hillary, in the beginning, yes, he admitted, the painful honesty burning his throat. When I drafted that contract, I was a bitter, hollow man. I wanted to prove to Sarah and to the world that I could buy loyalty, that I could control everything. But I was so incredibly wrong. "So, what am I now?" she whispered, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "Just a successfully completed transaction, tearing the contract." "You are the only real thing in my entire life," Christopher said, his voice cracking with a raw emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He walked over to his heavy oak desk, unlocked the bottom drawer, and pulled out the thick, legally binding folder that contained their dating contract. Without a moment of hesitation, he ripped the thick parchment completely in half, and then in half again, letting the shredded pieces fall like snow onto the polished marble floor. "There is no more contract," he declared firmly, his piercing eyes locking onto hers. "There are no more games, no more revenge, and no more hiding. Sarah belongs to a past I no longer want anything to do with. You, Hillary, you showed me what it actually means to live. You showed me that my wealth is entirely worthless if my soul remains bankrupt." Hillary looked at the torn pieces of paper on the floor, the heavy chain of her obligation officially broken. She was completely free to walk out the door. Her family's debts had already been paid, and her mother was receiving the best medical care available. She had no legal reason to stay. "If I stay," Hillary said softly, her heart pounding in her chest, "it won't be as an employee, and it won't be as a pawn. I need all of you, Christopher. The real you. No wars, no masks." Christopher closed the remaining distance between them, gently cupping her face in his hands. "I am entirely yours, if you'll have me," severing the past. The very next morning, Christopher arranged a brief, final meeting with Sarah at a neutral, public cafe. When she arrived, smiling with that familiar, calculated charm, expecting to have won him back, Christopher didn't even offer her a seat. "I came here to say one thing, Sarah," he stated, his voice devoid of anger, filled only with absolute finality. "Do not ever approach Hillary or me again. I spent years letting your betrayal dictate my life, but I am finally free of it. I pity the fact that you still equate love with status. Goodbye." He turned and walked away before she could even utter a single syllable in response, feeling a monumental weight lift off his shoulders with every step he took back toward his waiting car. A genuine future. Months later, the glaring flashes of the paparazzi and the superficial gala events no longer dictated their lives. While Christopher still ran his massive corporate empire, his priorities had fundamentally shifted. He spent his weekends at the modest, quiet rehabilitation center where Hillary's mother was successfully recovering, sitting by her bedside and learning what a real, unconditionally loving family looked like. Hillary had completely transformed Christopher's world, not by changing who he was, but by bravely uncovering the man he was always meant to be. The contract that had begun as a cold, transactional tool for vengeance had ultimately burned away, leaving behind something infinitely more valuable than all of his billions combined: a pure, unshakable, and entirely genuine love. A vow beyond paper. But I know one thing with absolute certainty, Christopher continued, turning his gaze back from the fading horizon to meet her eyes. I do not want a life where you are just a temporary chapter. He took a deep breath, the salty ocean air filling his lungs as he let the last remnants of his guarded walls crumble. I can't change the past, Hillary, and I can't magically erase the scars Sarah left. But I can choose who I give my future to. I don't want a contract anymore. I want to build something real with you, based on entirely new terms. Christopher reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a sleek silver pen and a napkin from the table. With a genuine, almost boyish smile that Hillary had never seen before, he began to write. If we're going to do this, he said softly, sliding the napkin toward her, these are the only terms I care about from now on. Absolute honesty. No more hiding behind walls, wealth, or past traumas. True partnership. You are my equal, not an employee, not a pawn, and never a distraction. The past stays dead. Sarah and the revenge plot no longer hold any power over us. Unconditional support. Your family is my family, and your burdens are mine to share. Hillary looked down at the napkin, tears prickling the corners of her eyes. It was a simple, messy list, but it held vastly more weight than the 100-page legal document she had signed months ago. For the first time, she saw the real Christopher Evans, not the ruthless billionaire, but a man fiercely ready to heal and love. I accept these terms, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, and intertwined her fingers with his. The final test, their return to the city, brought an immediate collision with reality. Word of their sudden, romantic getaway had reached the elite circles, and more importantly, it had reached Sarah. The very next morning, as Christopher and Hillary stepped into the grand lobby of Evans Enterprises, Sarah was waiting for them. She looked impeccable as always, draped in designer clothes and wearing a mask of cold superiority. Seeing them walking hand in hand, her eyes narrowed. A romantic weekend at the beach house. Sarah laughed, stepping directly into their path. You're truly taking this little charade to the extreme, Christopher. Don't you think it's time to end the act? The press is starting to actually believe you care about this, waitress. Hillary braced herself, the familiar sting of insecurity threatening to return. But before she could even take a breath, Christopher stepped slightly in front of her, becoming an unshakable shield. There is no act, Sarah. Christopher's voice was like ice, echoing off the marble walls of the lobby. The only mistake I made was letting you believe you still had a place in my life. Sarah's confident smirk faltered. You're throwing away our history for a girl who only wants her checkbook? She sneered, her voice rising in desperation. She wants nothing to do with my money, which is exactly why she has my entire heart, Christopher replied with devastating finality. My security team will escort you out. Do not ever approach us again. He didn't wait for her response. Keeping a firm, gentle hold on Hillary's hand, he led her past the stunned Sarah and straight into his private elevator. As the doors closed, effectively shutting out the ghosts of his past forever, Christopher pulled Hillary into his arms and kissed her. Not for the cameras, not for revenge, but with a profound, consuming passion that left absolutely no room for doubt. A genuine empire. In the months that followed, the superficial glamour of Christopher's world transformed. Hillary didn't change who she was to fit into his life. Instead, her humility and grace completely reshaped his. The extravagant gala dinners were slowly replaced by quiet, meaningful evenings. Christopher became a regular presence in Hillary's old neighborhood, helping her mother through her physical therapy and learning what a real, unconditionally loving family felt like. He used his immense wealth to open a foundation in Hillary's name, dedicated to providing medical care for low-income families, a project they ran side by side as true equals. The contract that had once bound them in a web of lies and revenge was entirely forgotten, replaced by a bond forged in vulnerability, truth, and profound respect. Hillary, the humble young woman who had once accepted an unthinkable deal just to save her family, never imagined what would happen to her in the end. She hadn't just saved her family. She had saved Christopher from himself, proving that the most powerful force in the world couldn't be bought, manipulated, or contracted. It could only be freely given, redefining the horizon. "But I'm willing to try," Christopher repeated, his voice barely louder than the rhythmic whisper of the tide against the shore. "For the very first time in a long time, Hillary, I am genuinely willing to try." Hillary remained completely silent, allowing the immense weight of his words to wash over her. Under the vast, starry canopy of the night sky, with the cool ocean breeze sweeping across her face, she silently processed this profound shift in the man before her. She was acutely aware that their journey ahead would be anything but easy. The ghosts of his past still lingered, and the sheer disparity of their worlds loomed large. Yet, looking into his vulnerable, uncovered eyes, she felt that perhaps this fractured, beautiful man was entirely worth the risk. Life, she realized, was ultimately defined by these rare moments of terrifying vulnerability, and this very moment felt like the dawn of something unmistakably real. When they finally returned to the bustling rhythm of the city, Hillary stepped back into her routine with a complex storm of emotions swirling inside her. While her feelings for Christopher were deepening with every passing day, the unyielding framework of the dating contract still hung over their heads like a dark cloud. What had originally begun as a cold, pragmatic exchange of financial survival for public appearances had transformed into an incredibly intricate emotional knot. The pressure of maintaining an artificial agreement while navigating very real affection was beginning to weigh on her far more than she cared to admit, forcing her to realize that a definitive choice was rapidly approaching: the dissolution of the deal. The turning point arrived unexpectedly on a quiet afternoon inside Christopher's expansive corporate office. They were sitting together, routinely reviewing a stack of legal documents tied to their arrangement, when Christopher suddenly stopped. He closed his laptop with a sharp, decisive snap and turned a chair to face her directly, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity she had never witnessed before. "Hillary, we need to talk about something of monumental importance," he said, taking a deep, grounding breath as if summoning a lifetime of latent courage. Hillary looked up, instantly sensing a thick, palpable tension filling the room. "What is it, Christopher?" "I want to end the contract," he declared flatly. For a terrifying second, the air left Hillary's lungs. She blinked rapidly, her mind scrambling to process the sudden finality of his words. "End the contract?" she repeated, her voice laced with sudden uncertainty and fear. "Yes," Christopher confirmed, his features softening as he reached out toward her. "It simply doesn't make an ounce of sense to me anymore. This entire agreement was originally built on a toxic foundation of vengeance, a desperate desire to manipulate my own feelings and punish Sarah. But everything has completely changed. What I feel for you now, Hillary, is entirely real. Continuing to hide behind this legal paperwork is just a constant, painful reminder of a past I desperately want to leave behind." Hillary sat in stunned silence, while a massive wave of relief washed over her to see him taking such a definitive, honorable step. A lingering fear whispered that it was all happening too fast. Tearing up a piece of paper wouldn't automatically heal the deep-seated emotional scars they both carried. "Christopher, I don't even know what to say," she began softly, her voice heavy with hesitation. "Are you truly ready to let go of all this? To completely leave the security of the contract and the shadows of your past behind?" He nodded without a shred of doubt, his eyes unwavering. "Yes, I am. For the first time in years, I feel like I can actually move forward. And I want to do that strictly with you. No contracts, no corporate games. Just us. Sincerity in a quiet cafe. Though her heart desperately wanted to leap forward, Hillary gently withdrew her hands from his touch. She knew she needed time and space away from his towering empire to understand her own heart. She needed to ensure they weren't just caught up in a fleeting, romantic whim. True to his word, Christopher respected her boundaries completely, promising to wait for her indefinitely, whatever her final decision might be. Days later, having achieved a profound sense of inner clarity, Hillary called Christopher and asked him to meet her, not at a high-end Manhattan establishment, but at a modest, quiet cafe nestled far away from the glitz of his mansions and corporate boardrooms. She intentionally chose a setting that reflected the simplicity, honesty, and grounded values she cherished above all else. When Christopher arrived, his usual billionaire bravado was entirely absent. He looked visibly nervous, the heavy anxiety of uncertainty etched into his handsome features. As they sat across from one another at a small wooden table, the atmosphere between them was charged with mutual expectation. "Christopher, I've thought deeply about everything you proposed," Hillary began calmly, her voice steady and clear. "About the contract, about the past, and about where we stand. And I agree with you. The contract has to end. It's a reminder of a story that started entirely the wrong way. If we are ever going to build something genuinely real, we need to burn the old foundation and start over completely blank. No agreements, no safety nets." A visible wave of profound relief washed over Christopher's face, though his eyes remained deeply vulnerable. "Hillary, I want nothing more than to start over with you. I don't know if you can ever truly forgive me for how I brought you into this." Hillary smiled tenderly, reaching across the table to gently touch his hand. "Forgiving you is not the obstacle, Christopher. The real question is whether you can finally forgive yourself, let go of the anger, and move forward without letting old betrayals define your future choices." Banishing the shadows. Her profound words struck Christopher to his very core. He finally recognized that his relentless obsession with getting revenge against Sarah had merely been a desperate, exhausting attempt to numb his own lingering pain. In his calculated quest for control, he had almost closed himself off from the only authentic connection he had ever found. "I will try," he promised, his voice low but fierce with absolute determination. "I want to be the man you truly deserve, Hillary, and I want to do it the right way." In the beautiful weeks that followed, their relationship blossomed into something entirely unrecognizable from their original arrangement. Stripped of legal obligations and public expectations, they finally learned to enjoy one another genuinely. Their laughter became frequent, their quiet conversations stretched long into the night, and every gesture of affection became entirely natural, born of true desire rather than a script. Naturally, the final test loomed in the form of Sarah, who made one last, desperate attempt to weave herself back into Christopher's life, banking on their volatile history to stir up drama. But Christopher was no longer the broken man she had left behind. He arranged a brief, final meeting with his ex-girlfriend, looking at her not with anger or yearning, but with total indifference. "I've completely changed, Sarah," Christopher told her with flat finality. "What we had is dead and buried, and there is absolutely no room for it in my life anymore. I have found something entirely real with Hillary, and I will never jeopardize my future over an old grudge." Seeing the absolute, unshakable sincerity in his eyes, Sarah finally realized she had lost all power over him. Dejected and defeated, she walked away, closing that tumultuous chapter of Christopher's life for good. The only promise that matters. Through it all, Hillary remained the unyielding pillar of authenticity she had always been. Even as she accompanied Christopher to elegant dinners and traveled to breathtaking destinations, she never lost her roots. Her humility remained her greatest superpower, and it was the very quality that Christopher admired most in her. On a remarkably clear, special evening, Christopher brought Hillary back to the very same beachfront property where they had first spoken with raw honesty. The night sky was brilliant with 1,000 stars, and the steady, calming melody of the ocean waves provided the perfect symphony for the moment. Turning to face her, Christopher's hands trembled slightly as he reached into his pocket. He slowly sank to one knee on the cool sand, holding up a simple, elegantly stunning ring that caught the moonlight. "Hillary, you completely transformed my broken world in ways I never could have imagined," he said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "You taught me how to feel, how to trust, and how to truly live. I don't ever want to face a day without you by my side. Will you marry me, officially and forever?" With tears of pure happiness shimmering in her eyes, Hillary smiled down at the man who had abandoned his armor just to love her. "Yes, Christopher," she whispered without a single shred of hesitation. "I will." In that beautiful, unscripted moment, there were no lingering contracts, no ghosts of revenge, and no past hurts. There were simply two resilient people, completely vulnerable and profoundly in love, ready to step hand in hand into a boundless future. What had begun as a cold, calculated transaction had ultimately evolved into an unbreakable, true love story, and that was more than enough.